And so this jury and this judge and this court, and many of you in the media saw and heard for yourselves, unprecedented rulings, unprecedented bias, unprecedented actions that gave this defendant the kind of leverage and liberty that brought about this verdict. We're going to continue to fight, but we're going to continue to be peaceful.
The Rittenhouse trial made national news. So did another big trial, this one in Georgia, where prosecutors say 3 white men shot and killed a black man, Ahmaud Arbery, who was out for a jog in a neighborhood. Our next guest says trials like these can have a trauma component for the black community. Alvin Thomas is an assistant professor at UW-Madison and an expert on mental health in black men and boys, and he joins us now on Upfront. Thank you for being with us. I just want to start by getting your reaction to this verdict.
So I think in general, the reaction is one of resignation almost. It doesn't seem too far out of the ordinary of what I think a lot of people were expecting, and yet it's not what people wished for or were hoping for.
And I want to ask you about this. I've been hearing a lot of people calling our newsroom or people standing outside the courthouse, and people have asked, how does the Rittenhouse trial impact people of color when the people Rittenhouse shot were not black? They were white. How does it impact the black community?
So I think even in the civil rights movement, it was not just black people marching, not just black people involved. That this was less an issue about black or white and more an issue around humanity and how our respect for humanity, our appreciation for humanity. And so the fact that this was part of a Black Lives Matter protest or part of a Black Lives Matter movement, this is also part of an ancillary part of not uprising, but the work that was happening regarding in response to the George Floyd killing, that this was all part and parcel with all of what was going on. And so I think it takes on the color of some of that, even though the victims were not black.
And you research mental health in black men and boys. Right now, there are 2 trials that have been gripping the country. We have the Rittenhouse trial and the Ahmaud Arbery trial. What impacts do cases like this have on the mental health of the black community?
So there is a high risk for post-traumatic stress responses to it. In fact, I've been watching social media spaces like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and noticing increases in posts about people feeling stressed, triggered, tired, angry, depressed, sad. And all of this increased traffic was notably around some of these recent events. When we look back at incidents like the Trayvon Martin trial and similar trials like George Zimmerman's, these are not different in that they have the same general impact, the same general kinds of post-traumatic stress responses related to them. And of course, when we think of post-traumatic stress responses, we think of things like re-experiencing, we think of hypervigilance, we think of avoidance, flashbacks, nightmares, feelings of stress in your body that are related to some of the strains and stresses that are part and parcel of these experiences. And again, these incidents and the fallout are not uncommon to people of color. This has been happening for a long period of time. It just means that there's a resurgence of some of those same feelings whenever we have a new trial or a new activity or a new incident like this one.
And you're a researcher, so go ahead and explain for those who don't understand how you could feel PTSD when you weren't even necessarily in the thick of this.
I think we see a similar thing. We see a similar thing with regard to post-traumatic stress responses when we see events on television, when we read about events, or when we're directly connected to some of those events. So, for example, the largest one of the largest, most recent post-traumatic stress responses for America as a country was 9/11. And most of us were not present in New York City at the buildings during the 9/11 event, and yet many of us can think back to exactly where we were, and we can think of the feelings of fear and loss of control, sadness, depression, anger that we felt immediately after the event and long term. A lot of us, when the anniversary of 9/11 comes around, we still have those feelings. They're different. We feel them differently, but those feelings come back. We re-experience those same feelings, and so that in the largest sense, that's an example of how something that you may not be directly tied to or may not have directly experienced has a post-traumatic stress type of response, elicit a post-traumatic stress type of response. And I think in much the same way, we see that happening for groups where issues around like the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, we see issues like the George Floyd verdict would have these kinds of potential post-traumatic stress responses because of the close connection, the close identity connection, historical connection between the individual, the community, and the victims.
Okay, Dr. Alvin Thomas with UW, you bring a really interesting perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, Alaska gun rights advocate about the Rittenhouse trial. Should teenagers really be carrying AR-15s?